This is the team from Étoile, and this is the Deadline studio at Prime Experience.
Well, in my case, I've been working with Amy and Dan since the first season of Mrs. Maisel.
Since the first episode.
So, first episode of Mrs. Maisel. So it's kind of just a continuation of a pretty good relationship.
I was an assistant editor on every season, every episode except the pilot of Maisel. And Tim Strito was the editor that I worked with, and he promoted me to Amy and Dan. So I got to edit an episode in the last season, and then they brought me on for Étoile with Tim.
And I'm just following Ron from Mrs. Maisel.
For me, it was the size of the show. I mean, you know, it's one thing to have a show shot in Paris as well as in New York with very different recording techniques in both places, but it was also just the scope of the amount of dancers, the amount of people in the show was just, it was more than I ever thought possible.
Yeah, I mean, Amy and Dan have such a specific way of having characters talk to each other, and to that degree, having, 18 cast members or whatever talking to each other is like a really intimidating but exciting thing to work with. And then, I mean, the dance is such a incredible part of the show. Like, as someone who has been to ballet casually, to actually like watch all of this dance, all these takes, all these, incredibly physical, athletic people do this over and over again, that was incredible. Amy and Dan are so like fast. Dialogue is fast. Everything's fast. There's no silence, as you guys fix. But when people are speaking in French and you have to read subtitles, you have to find the balance between fast, but being able to track what's happening. So that was one of the big things right off the bat, especially because they shot in Paris before New York. So the very first things we were dealing with was French, and how do we make sure that everyone can follow it and understand it, but also stay engaged.
Yeah, like I have to make sure that you can understand all those words that come flying at you. So I'll listen through, and if there's something I don't catch on the first listen through, I know I need to either find a different take and swap it out, or, make something clearer.
We had a really amazing script supervisor, both in New York and Paris, and so they would mark takes for, like, this is good for dance, which was incredibly helpful because, again, not knowing dance beforehand, it was a real challenge. But the real, in episode 2, there's that joint press conference between New York and Paris, and, like, that was the real moment for me where it was like, holy cow, we have so many people in this show. We had, in the cutting room, we had boards with just all the different characters and, their names and stuff, so that we could actually keep track of who everyone was, because there's, just so many people.
Well, it was all nicely recorded, which meant none of it sounded like it was coming out of speakers or coming out of France or coming out of New York when you were in France. And I mean, all that had to get constructed. So, Sarah had to go through and figure out, okay, we're on the monitor here. No, now we're in New York. Now, it just became a puzzle to kind of sort out. And again, to still continue with the characters, because they were flipping between this screen, that screen, New York talk, whatever. It just kept going back and forth. And, one of our challenges with Amy and Dan always is to present a lot of reality in the track. So, we have to give it a sense that this is actually happening.
Was it complex to capture the reality of like ballet performance as far as sounds?
Yes, to a point. It was a challenge, but it was also helped greatly by the fact that the post supervisor kind of forced them to always do a sound only take during the dance. So, there would have been playback for the dancers to dance, but then we did one, or they did one on location for just sound. So I had a feet track, I had footfalls, all doing the proper thing. And then our music editor, Annette Kudrick, actually kept it in sync for us as they continued to do their cuts. So that gave me a base in order to let those dancers fall into. Both cities became their own character, yeah. And I've never been to Paris, so that is a place where both Amy and Dan, kind of told me what the main differences are between New York sounds and what goes on in Paris, and we adapted as we went.
They would go, there's a bus that goes like dun 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 dun.
Yeah. There's sirens. When the sirens start, they're not like New York sirens. They just don't go by fast. They stick around, things like that. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's something, just the way that they keep up the pace of the dialogue to slip jokes in while something really serious is happening so that you're laughing, but you're paying attention, but you're not like missing moments. It's a very carefully constructed experience on their end, and they make sure that they get every beat they want covered in production. And that's part of also what made the dance feel so special, was it was actually just like a breath where you would just hear the music and watch people dance. No one's talking, no one's racing down a hallway to get somewhere. Like you're just enjoying like an art form. And so that was really like pointed and special. But yeah, I mean, they're just really good. They're just really good at getting what you need. Like when the dailies come in, you can just see the moments where things work and just put it all together.
Do extended tracking shots make your job easier or harder?
It depends. Sometimes if there's one circle take, then that's it. We're done. Great. Other times there'll be the half of this take was good, but the half of this take was good. Is there any way we can put them together? Mm-hmm. And then you have to figure out if there's any way to put them together. But they're just so fun to watch. When you get those good ones, they're great. Yeah, I mean, Robin Erdang is our music supervisor, and Amy and Dan also come with a lot of music. They'll come into the cutting room with like a stack of 50 iPods. That's like the Show Tunes iPod, the 50s Sock Hop iPod, and they'll just sit there and just go through songs with you. And that gives so much life and so much energy to the show. Like when they have an idea for a song and you put it in and it's like it's like perfect to the cuts and it's just great. Or we'd get batches of music from Robin and you would just sit there and listen to like Tobias's metal music that he listens to. We were listening to hours of like this ridiculous, just like screaming, thrashing, stuff to find the right music. But that gives the show so much life. I mean, Amy and Dan, and I agree, it makes sense, find it hard to watch things through without like some form of sound work done. So we temp a lot of stuff and give it to you guys, and then you give it back and you've put in all this stuff that we never even thought was missing.
Well, that's
and then
kind of our job. But they do an excellent job of giving us a template to work within. And we bring everything that they have spent their time listening to into the mix, as well as everything that we feel we need to add and embellish. All the group stuff ends up being very sculptured by Amy wanting to hear, the group doing a certain thing at a certain point that no one would have. You'd have to do it with a group. It's not like a sound effect you can just use and put in. So that's one of the ways things would evolve from whatever the picture department would give us.
Yeah.
But we did have some moments too, like the Cheyenne on the boat, where we had to give that to you pretty much right
ahead
away.
Of time, yeah, ahead
because you couldn't understand anything when it was water splashing and fans blowing, and you couldn't hear a word she was saying.
That was the first thing I
Yeah,
worked on.
that was like right away. Like, please, please fix this.
What was the overall hardest thing or most challenging part of it for you?
Well, all the noise and that, and getting their voices out without ruining the voices. You can go too far with processing stuff. And
What are the kinds of tricks in layman's terms, some of the techniques to kind of manage that?
well, a lot of it is if you have noise on one take and it goes into a take that doesn't have the same noise, you need to find some of that noise and put it at the end so that you fade it in and fade it out and you won't notice as much all the noise. And maybe going to other takes and finding better, slightly less, one that doesn't have a wave going over. Or something.
I mean, not speaking French and not knowing ballet terms was a very challenging part of it.
Oh yeah.
We had an amazing apprentice who both knew ballet and spoke French. And so the number of times that, you'd throw your door open and just yell for Christy to come check something for you. And she'd come in and look at it and go, that's not, they're not saying what they're supposed to be saying. Or, like Amy said, it's good until the jeté. What's a jeté? And she'd come in and like show me what a jeté was. It's really strange because you still get into the same like rhythm patterns of speech, even though like in French, this is something we ran into a lot actually, was Amy and Dan would want the emphasis to be at the end of a sentence because that's what in English we're used to, that being the emphatic end to a sentence. But the word that they're putting the emphasis on is actually in the middle of the sentence in French. So it sounds weird if they're emphasizing blue or so whatever comes at the end of the sentence. And so that was a really interesting learning curve for all of us to like try to figure that out. But in terms of editing it the first time, we had a script with the French dialogue, next to the English, and you would just like try to follow along, try to pick a word that you could like, it wasn't like Mandarin or something that's like really hard to understand if you don't speak it. You could at least hear syllables that you could recognize. And we would just follow along and cut a version based on how you think it should be cut. And then we would have our apprentice come in and watch it, and she would tell you, you missed a line, or they repeated the line twice, but you couldn't tell because they put different emphasis on different words, or, and that, it was really a lot of trial and error at first. And then eventually you kind of got into the flow of like, okay, this is like how French sounds. This is how the emphasis comes, like, and then it definitely got easier as the show went on.
In my mind, the final episode is the kicker for me. But I'm also very fond of 2, of the second one, because it's just damn funny.
Yeah, I mean, I love, in 8 especially, I love the 2 dances.
Yeah.
Like, the 2 final dances are just so impressive and incredible and different and weird. And, we spent the whole show watching this beautiful ballet, and then, like, the I Married Myself dance is so different than anything else, and it's just so fun to watch. I really love episode 7 because we see Mishi's story, like, come to a conclusion of sorts. And Thais, who played Mishi, is an incredible dancer, but not an actress. And watching her evolve as Mishi through the show to then have this like crescendo moment was a really, really satisfying and really fun thing to watch.
I also really enjoyed the first episode because I got really excited about, they have when they're discussing who to swap, you get the eclipse to them dancing, and I don't know, I got really excited about what the show was going to be.
It was a tough one, truly a tough one, mainly because it just kept evolving. All the episodes themselves kept evolving, and you're working within a certain confine of how many weeks we have on a show or how many weeks you have in an episode, and things get kind of dicey. So I'm just happy it was complete.
Yeah, I mean, I was, this was my first big actual series that I was an editor on. So just every day when I came in, I was like, you guys sure we're still doing this? All right, let's go. So to actually have like seen the whole show through and like working with Tim Strito, who was the other editor on the show, and just being able to like bounce things off each other, watch each other's stuff, like work together after I had worked, with him as a mentor for so many years, to actually just be like partners with him was really just amazing.
Oh yeah, and this is my daughter.
That's why, yeah, I
Yeah.
thought, yeah.
So it was
That too.
it was kind of the first time we did something on this level. So
Yes. I mean, it's the same as working with anyone except you can be really candid.
yeah.
Can't help.
Like you don't have to worry about offending someone.
Yeah.
Because it's your dad.